came home late one night. He was drunk, and he goes into the bedroom and pulls her out of the bed while she's in it. He literally takes the top mattress off the bed and throws her on the floor because he was trying to get her attention. I come out my room, and he's hitting on her, and I'm like, get your hands off her. Stop hitting my mom. Stop hitting my mom. And he turns around. He said, get out of here. I said, I told him, I'm going to kill you. One day I'm going to beat you up. You can't do my mom like that. And he hit me in my chest and knocked all the wind out of me. I realized my dad was an alcoholic when I was 7 years old. We were stationed in Stuttgart, Germany. What really made me realize it was just his outbursts, especially towards my mom. When he was really drunk, he took it all out on her. So a lot of the verbal and physical abuse became evident, and that's when I knew something was really wrong with him and with the abuse he was having with the alcohol. When my father was sober, he was one of the best people to be around. I really looked up to. I looked up to him. He was my hero. Growing up in a military family, the dad was, he was the one who did all the work, always in different countries, serving the country, fighting the wars that people didn't know about. So I always looked up to him. And when he was sober, I was with him all the time. Wherever he went, if I could go to his office, I go to the office and hang out with him. At the gym, at the bowling alley, all the fun things that I wanted to do as a kid. When he was sober, we did it. Dad was drunk. I didn't like being in the house. My sister and I would leave the house, go outside and play or find something to do. But when it was in the evening times, we couldn't do anything but just go in the room and pretty much lock your door. Just had to stay in the room and just deal with all the loud commotion going on.
And you dealt with that by playing video games, right?
I dealt with my dad being drunk by playing video games or going to play with a neighbor, going outside to play basketball, play football, anything to get away that would allow me to get away from what was going on in the house, I did. An average drunken day, my dad would stay out all hours of the night. Lived on an army base, so he wasn't too far, but it's like he just wasn't home. On an average drunken day, there was always music being played in the house because he would just sit on the couch with a beer or with his gin and Sprite and just be sitting there listening to music, drinking. So that was the average. My dad was an alcoholic until he got sick. My dad got sick in, I want to say 2004. When he was diagnosed with like lupus, but he still drank. That's the crazy thing about it. So really, my dad stayed alcoholic until he died in 2006. Dad was forced to get treatment and help for his addiction as a result of him beating on my mom. And she had enough of it, so she went to his superiors, the people he reported to in the military. It got to the point where she had to go to his superiors and tell them what was going on to make them aware of the issues that were happening in the home with his physical and verbal abuse. So the military forced him to receive treatment. And as a result of that case, my father lost his ranking. He was a high-ranking officer in the military, but because of that, he went before the board and they took his rank, had to go through treatment, and then shortly after that, he retired from the military. The way I coped with my dad's drinking was play video games. I had a Walkman back in the day when had old tape, the tape player Walkman. I'd put the tape player in and put the headphones on, and I'd have the video games down on mute and just be listening to the music, playing the games, so I couldn't hear what was going on. If it was during the day, my dad was drunk, I was outside playing with my friends, playing basketball, playing football, anything just to get away and be by myself. It was New Year's Day, 2001. I'd come home from college on Christmas break, and I had broke my nose playing basketball prior to coming home, so I had to have surgery. And every New Year's Day, I would go to my dad's house to eat. He always fixed rabbit, some type of wild game to celebrate the new year. But at that point, I had a lot of built up anger and aggression towards my dad from all the years of how he treated us, how he treated my mom, and being a kid and seeing him beat on my mom and not ever able to do anything, threatening him as a kid, knowing that I couldn't do anything. But as I got older, that resentment and that hatred and that bitterness, it just kept building up, and it all came to a tilt on that New Year's Day. We were at his house, and I don't even know what we were talking about. He referenced something about me being at ORU and why I decided to go somewhere that I had to pay for my education. And my response was, I would have stayed in state, but you drank away all my college tuition. So he took some offense to that, had some more unchoice words to say to me, so we went back and forth, and I pretty much told him, I said, I don't have to put up with this. You don't have to talk to me like this. So we were in each other's face, and next thing I know, everything, all that hatred, all that anger came out, and I hit him, and he came back towards me, and I hit him again, and he stood up and he grabbed me by my shirt, and he was looking at me, and he wanted to punch me in my face. And mind you, the day before, I had just had surgery done to repair my nose. So I don't know if you've ever had a broken nose, but it's very tender, and weeks after the surgery, you can't take any kind of pressure to the nose, because if you do, it's potential that you can re-break it and you could possibly die. So he's standing there looking at me, had his fist drawn, and under my breath, I'm mad, but I'm starting to pray, like, Lord, don't let him hit me in my nose, don't let him hit me in my nose. And he is trying to swing his fist at my face, and his hand wouldn't move. And he literally had to look back at his hand because it wasn't going anywhere. And to me, that was the angels holding his hand back, because he had one intention at that moment in time, and that was to hit me in my face. And he didn't. He couldn't figure out why, or why his hand wouldn't move, but I know why. So I ended up leaving the house, went home, and I literally cried like a baby. And I cried like a baby because it was a release for me. Not the kind of release that I would have hoped for with my father, but for almost 20 years, I had had all this pent-up anger and aggression and never knew how to release it. And at that particular moment, I released it in a way that I would have never thought possible. So, to be able to say that I beat my dad up, I don't feel proud about that. But I did. And when I say it was a weight lifted, from that day on, the rest of our relationship was on cloud 9. It was the weirdest thing. He had that much more respect for me. I had a lot more respect for him. He apologized about a lot that he had done, and we really bonded and grew like never before after that. And like I said, it's weird that it took to have that type of altercation for our relationship to really grow and develop, but it did until the day he died. My dad was an alcoholic. I wanted to be the total opposite. I didn't want to be anything like him. because of his addiction, because I knew that those genes ran and that his blood flows through my veins, and I know that it would be possible for me to go down that path that he did. So I vowed that I didn't want to be anything like him. So I did everything opposite that he did. But if it wasn't for my mother, who was the rock in their relationship until they got married, who was the rock in my family, if it wasn't for her, putting me around godly men, putting me around men that knew the word, the men that treated their wives properly, I wouldn't have known what it was to be a good man, because the example I had wasn't a good one. And it was only because of his addiction that caused him to be like that. So my mom surrounded me with other men up until I graduated college. Yes, I would talk to my dad get advice from him, but it was more so out of, he's my dad, I need to run things by him, because I don't want him to find out after the fact. But because he wasn't giving godly counsel, godly wisdom, because a lot of times we talked, he was drunk. So he could say anything, and a lot of times it didn't make any sense. So I would always have to go to somebody else to get, the proper perspective on whatever I was dealing with in life. So it chose, I wanted to be somebody that he wasn't, and I think that I've become that. Today, my dad is deceased, but he is in heaven, and I know I'll get to see him again when Jesus comes back, or when it's my time to go. I know I'll see him again, but yeah, he died in 2006. Relationship with my dad before he passed away, it was amazing. It was amazing. He was in hospice. He was in and out of hospice, and I was living here, and he was in Louisville. So there were times where the sickness that he had caused him to go into a coma. So I would go see him, but there was no communication. I would just sit in a room with him and just talk to him. We'd had a game on, and it'd be like we were watching the game together, knowing that he can't even see it at all. Then there were times where I would go and he'd be fine, and we'd have conversation, we'd talk. First went into the hospital, I was able to have one of my mentors go into the hospital room and talk to him about Christ and have him receive salvation, literally on his deathbed. So the last few months that he was alive, I was at such a peace, because I knew that no matter when he died, he would stop suffering, that he wouldn't have to suffer anymore, that he can just go rest in the arms of Jesus, knowing that everything was going to be okay.